Child prodigy, nature writer, princess, con artist, Opal Whiteley has been called all of these and more.
That's the million-dollar question. Who was Opal Whiteley?
Opal Whiteley grew up poor in the logging shanty towns around Cottage Grove. But by the time she was a teenager, she was famous, and by her early 20s, infamous.
She was easily the most brilliant and popular teenager to ever come out of the state of Oregon.
Opal was considered to some people a genius, and to others she was considered a nut.
She was a complete fraud.
All we ever thought of was she was weird. A lot of people don't know yet to this day who Opal Whiteley is or why her mural's on the wall.
In 1920, everyone in Oregon knew about Opal Whiteley. She'd been labeled a child prodigy for her nature studies and admitted to the University of Oregon before finishing high school. She had toured the state as a religious leader and gained international fame as a writer.
She left Oregon and published a couple of books. One was self-published, and the second one was a bestseller in the 1920s, and it was alleged to be her childhood diary written when she lived in Cottage Grove, Oregon as a little child.
When the diary came out in 1920, it wasn't a big deal just in Oregon. It was huge nationally. It was the #2 bestseller of the year. It was a major, major story here in Oregon.
It was described as a nature diary and detailed her life as a small child in the logging camps. It also contained clues that she had been kidnapped as a child and was really a French princess. No one could prove what was true or what wasn't.
And I would say that the story of Opal Whiteley is a legend. One of the requirements of a legend is that you cannot prove precisely what happened. And another requirement is that you cannot prove precisely what didn't happen.
I like to call Opal Whiteley the last literary mystery of the 20th century.
Funding for Oregon Experience is provided by the James F. and Marion L. Miller Foundation, the Ann and Bill Swindell's Charitable Trust, the Oregon Cultural Trust, and from viewers like you. Thank you.
The wind comes creeping in under the door. It calls, "Come, come, petite Françoise, come." I hear all the voices calling me. I listen, but I cannot go.
In 1992, Her Royal Highness Françoise Marie de Bourbon-Orléans died in a British hospital. People in Oregon knew her as Opal Whiteley, where she grew up as a lumberjack's daughter. She claimed to have been kidnapped as a child and given to the Whiteley family. She said their daughter had died. Her childhood diary gave credence to her claims. To this day, no one can prove decisively who she really was or when the diary was written, and she continues to be one of Oregon's most controversial figures.
She might have been a great naturalist who knew all about nature. She might have been a great writer who was very poetic and wrote about childhood. Some people think she was a French princess. Other people think she's some sort of an eco-heroine. And some people think she was a complete fraud.
In 1897, a child was born to Ed and Lizzie Whiteley. They named her Opal. There was no birth certificate to record the event. Her father was a lumberjack who followed the work. When Opal was 4 years old, they moved from Colton, Washington, to the logging communities near Cottage Grove, Oregon. It was during this journey that Princess Françoise says kidnappers gave her to the Whiteleys. She says from then on, she was called Opal.
When the Whiteleys would have come, downtown Cottage Grove would have been still wooden buildings with the beginnings of brick buildings which exist today.
Pioneers had settled the area for its farmland, followed by miners looking for gold in the nearby Bohemia Mountains. But the jobs were in timber. This was the Douglas Fir Empire. And Ed Whiteley worked in the logging camps.
Ed Whiteley was a logger. Lizzie Whiteley was a logger's wife. They worked hard. Life at the turn of the 20th century was not easy here in Oregon. They sometimes lived in tents in the logging camps and hauling water and planting whatever vegetables they can. If you wanted meat, you butchered an animal. So they spent their time doing what needed to be done to get by.
Mrs. Whiteley was a very sad woman because she wanted more out of life. She was an educated woman. She thought when she was marrying Ed Whiteley that she was marrying a man that was going to move up the ladder in life, and instead found herself living in these dirty logging camps that she just hated.
Opal seemed destined for something more. She could read at an early age and had a photographic memory. She amazed her church congregation by reciting long Bible passages from memory. When she entered school, she promptly skipped the first 2 grades.
Opal was different from everybody else in the family. Opal was studious. Opal liked the outdoors. She was religious. She didn't fit in with the other girls at all.
Opal was considered somewhat of a dreamer. Her grandmother spoke more often about how Opal was really quite a trial as a child, and how she would get off into dream states and wouldn't get her work done, and said, well, I just call that inattention and absent-mindedness. And she said, and she wouldn't respond to switching either.
Sometimes I do have thinks this world is a different world to live in. I do have lonesome feels.
She immersed herself in nature. She obsessively collected and labeled thousands of specimens of plants and insects. Her knowledge was encyclopedic, and she loved to share it. As a young teenager, she taught classes and gave lectures, and she was good at it. Even when she charged admission, the community came out to hear her speak.
She loved teaching other children about nature, and she knew all about the forests around Cottage Grove where she grew up. She kind of became a local celebrity. They called her the little nature girl.
I wonder if honeysuckles grow about the gates of heaven. Probably God brought the seed from heaven when he did plant the flowers here on earth.
Opal was always religious, and a church group provided a structured outlet for her talents.
She joined a group called the Christian Youth Endeavor, which was a non-denominational evangelical organization which essentially wanted children to engage in reading about and understanding the gospel of Jesus Christ and do good works along those lines.
Opal quickly became a force within the movement. She was elected the state junior superintendent of the Christian Endeavor, and at just 17, she set out on tour, motivating communities to start new junior Endeavor societies.
And she went all around the state as a sort of a celebrity. And she entranced the crowd and the press because she was very appealing. She had long black curly hair. She looked just like Mary Pickford, favorite movie star of the period. She was dainty and tiny. She was under 5 feet, kind of a little bird woman. Very fashionable look for the time. She was said to speak like a waterfall, on and on and on, in a very charismatic way.
The Christian Endeavor's membership skyrocketed. During her tenure, nearly 100 new chapters opened in Oregon, and Opal got her first real taste of fame.
She was easily the most well-known and popular teenager in the state of Oregon.
She actually achieved national press in 1915 when she was 17 years old, in which the editor of the Cottage Grove Sentinel, named Elbert Bede, wrote a story about her for Sunset magazine under the category called Interesting Westerners, in which he talked about this marvelous young woman who knew so much about nature.
It was a good story for him. Nothing much happened in Cottage Grove besides Buster Keaton had come there to make the movie The General. That was pretty exciting. And the next best thing that happened was Opal.
In 1916, she made the papers again after visiting the University of Oregon. She stunned the faculty with her knowledge of nature.
She was considered really a child prodigy and a potential genius by the professors.
This experience happens to a university, but once in a generation. She may become one of the greatest minds Oregon has ever produced. Professor Warren Smith.
Though she hadn't finished high school, the university admitted her, where again she stood out.
She was known as a bit of a sprite on the U of O campus. She would run around campus chasing after butterflies with her long braids flying and her long gown flying. And one day, the wife of the president was walking along campus and saw Opal down on the ground on her knees in the grass, singing a hymn very quietly. And Opal looked up at her and said, "I am singing to one of God's creatures." And in front of her on the ground was an earthworm.
People at the university said she was like a campus personality. The faculty remembered her kind of traipsing around campus with photographers in tow. So she had a reputation of being a kind of a nutty attention seeker.
College life proved difficult. Unlike most of the other young women in her class, she lived alone off campus and was always struggling to pay her bills, sometimes going without food or heat. She fell behind in her studies and never seemed to catch up. Then in 1917, her life changed forever. After a long battle with cancer, her mother died.
She is dead, they said, and they gathered up the things of her days, life's little spindle, her gentle ways.
It was a horrible, horrible period in her life. Opal was the oldest. She had clearly been under pressure to help out at home.
There were 4 younger children, and everybody wanted Opal to quit school and take care of the children.
Instead, she decided to go to California. She announced she would be doing nature studies, but privately she planned to break into movies and ultimately leave the logging towns far behind her.
And she left for good and went on the train to San Francisco and then subsequently Los Angeles to become famous.
In 1918, World War I had just ended. Nationally, women were still 2 years away from getting the vote. The Spanish flu was killing millions. But in Los Angeles, silent films were providing a new form of escapism. Opal wanted to be a part of it. She had a series of photos taken showing her in dramatic poses.
And she took these photographs to the studio bosses and the directors down in Los Angeles. And again, this was an infant industry itself, 1917, 1918.
Movie stars were a fairly new phenomena at that time. And so I guess she was a little bit ahead of her time. At least she was getting definitely on the bandwagon and went down to Hollywood as soon as she could.
And she had big plans. She wrote out a to-do list that included learning to act and meeting with some of the most famous people of the times. But breaking into movies proved harder than she imagined. Within weeks, she gave up and returned to what she knew, teaching nature classes to children. Only this time, the parents were California's elite, and they were taken with a struggling young woman.
And she had a way of just a magnetism, a charisma that apparently just swept a lot of people off their feet as soon as they met her. People were willing to help her because she seemed so earnest.
People gave her all kinds of help, and they gave her office space, and they were enchanted by her. She was incredibly charming.
With this support, she began work on a book based on her nature studies called The Fairyland Around Us.
And what you would do at the time was not an uncommon practice where you would solicit funding from people who wanted a copy of your book, and they would pay ahead of time. She raised $9,400, which is an amazing sum.
But it wasn't quite enough. When she ran out of money to pay the printer, she painstakingly finished the books herself, pasting in pictures and writing captions by hand. The Cottage Grove Library houses one of the few copies known to exist.
There's hand-pasted pictures. Some of them are hand-drawn, some are photographs. You don't see books like this anymore, ever. This book is unique, and it's also very old. Very interesting. And for the butterflies, they afield and wayside, we held a reception. Not that we waited to receive them, but went out to meet them, with sweetened water on our fingertips. It's beautiful.
Opal sent out copies to famous people all over the world. They sent her polite thank you notes that she used as reviews. Encouraged, she headed to Boston, the literary capital of the time.
The Atlantic Monthly was a major literary force of the time, and a cultural force too. And at that time, you could actually walk into a publisher's office, talk to the secretary, and get an appointment.
She got an interview with Ellery Sedgwick, who was a famous editor of the Atlantic Monthly.
Mr. Sedgwick was not interested in that book, but he was interested in Opal. He felt that she must have kept a diary, which was a not uncommon practice at the time. And she said, well, yes, I kept a diary. And he said, that's the book I want to see.
He says that she burst into tears and said she had written a childhood diary which was destroyed by a cruel foster sister.
Got torn to pieces by my jealous sister. And then she pauses and says, but I have all the pieces. He says, you've kept the pieces. Where are they? She said, they're in boxes in Los Angeles.
And Sedgwick said that he said, we must send for them at once. And the box was sent for.
Sedgwick put Opal up in his mother-in-law's house in Boston, and she spent the next months piecing together the torn pieces of this diary.
She started gluing it all together, and here was this amazing childhood diary, which was then published in the Atlantic Monthly. Sales were excellent. People loved it. They thought it was kind of an amazing and enchanting document of childhood. And also, it was just a kind of exotic.
I sit on her steps and I do print. I like it, this house we do live in. Being at the mama says I'm a nuisance. I guess a nuisance is something grown-up people don't like to have around it. About the mill do live some people. There does live the good man that wears gray neckties and is kind to mice. When the brown leaves flutter, they are saying little things. I hear them tell of their borning days, when they did come into the world as leaves.
She had a marvelous way of mixing the children and nature together with real spiritual values and presenting a view of the world that you only see maybe from a young person's eyes.
In 1920, the series was published as a book, The Story of Opal, The Journal of an Understanding Heart. By some, it was hailed as a work of brilliance, a nature diary written by a child prodigy. By others, a fraud. The book became a bestseller. In Oregon, it flew off the shelves, and a storm of controversy swirled.
I believe the diary opens, today the folks are gone from the house we do live in. Well, nobody at Cottage Grove probably spoke that way at the time. I don't think anybody in Cottage Grove or Eugene or New York City speaks that way now.
The entire diary was unusual. It described a little girl immersed in a nature fairyland, with knowledge and insight beyond her years.
There's a number of famous people who are born and die, she notes in the diary. Where does she learn about these people? Because she just went to a country schoolhouse.
The diary itself, it is just chock full of every possible fanciful name you can think of. What have we got? A tree named Michelangelo, Sanzio, Raphael, and a pig named Aphrodite, and a horse named William Shakespeare.
But perhaps the most shocking part of the diary was the claim that Opal wasn't a Whiteley at all, but that the Whiteleys had raised her after her real parents had died. Opal said she couldn't remember who her real parents were, but she suggested that vague memories of them might have come out in her diary.
Of the days before I was taken to the lumber camps, there is a little I remember. As piece by piece the journal comes together, some things come back.
French words sprinkled in the diary hinted at Opal's real identity.
Alert readers noticed that there were all kinds of clues within the book that indicated that Opal was really a French princess. At this point, some people began to get skeptical, especially in Oregon.
Acrostics appeared to spell the name of her real father, Henri d'Orléans. He was a naturalist and a member of France's displaced royal family, who died when Opal was a small child.
The story of Opal being a French princess in Cottage Grove was received in the way you would expect it to be received. A town like Cottage Grove, these are down-to-earth people, hard-working, very practical-minded. There are no French princesses in Cottage Grove.
As the story gained national and international attention, the press tried to track down the facts.
And a Cottage Grove newsman Elbert Bede, who made a lifelong career out of pursuing her. Every time Opal popped up in the news for any reason over the decades, he would be right there writing more articles about her.
The Christian Science Monitor wrote about her. The Publishers Weekly wrote about her. A magazine called Bookman, which was another monthly magazine, they wrote about her. Who was the real Opal Whiteley?
It was very painful for her family because she rejected them completely and said they weren't her family. They were very ashamed. They left Cottage Grove, they changed their names, and they didn't speak about her for years.
You want to know the truth about the mystery of Opal? I'll tell you, mister, the honest truth. There's no mystery except the mystery of why Opal wants to disown her own folks and how she can get people to believe she's an adopted baby.
But many of Opal's fans believed her story, and debate raged over what was real and what wasn't, and over when it was written, in childhood, as she claimed, or later as an elaborate hoax, or perhaps during a mental breakdown. No one could be sure.
When the brown leaves fluttered, they are saying little things, and I did listen on to what they were telling the wind and the earth in their whisperings. They told how they were a part of the earth and air before their tree-borning days, and now they are going back. In the great days of winter, they go back to the earth again, but they do not die. I just find that very, very wonderful writing.
Most of us would notice that there's some raw talent at work. And when you look at the descriptions and the scenes in the diary, you will see what is really a quite sophisticated eye at work. And there is even an element that would make a case for saying that no child of 6 or 7 could have come up with these scenarios.
It doesn't read like a diary at all. To me, it's clearly written as a narrative piece. It's written to appeal to adults who have a certain sugary view of children.
Within a year, the book was out of print, and interest in Opal faded. She never returned to Oregon and never spoke with the Whiteleys again. Instead, she traveled through Europe, living the life of Princess Françoise de Bourbon-Orléans. She wrote travel articles for a British magazine and was generally accepted as the daughter of Henri d'Orléans. She befriended the noble families of Europe and India, sometimes living off their hospitality, at least for a while.
As Opal got older, her mental skills did deteriorate.
In 1948, she was found living in squalor in London and committed to Knapsbury Asylum, where she lived until her death in 1992. To the end, she continued to insist she was a French princess that had been switched with the real Opal.
She's a princess imprisoned in a castle on a hill, just like in a classic fairy tale.
My father was an explorer, Prince Henry of Orleans, and Mama was an Archduchess of Austria. I was very happy there.
Bless her heart, she just needed more than what we could give. Understanding is basically what she needed.
Everybody always said there was something different about her. And I guess the question is now is there something really wrong with her? You can almost see every psychiatric diagnosis in the book in Opal Whiteley.
In her lifetime, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It has been suggested she had a form of autism or may have suffered a brain injury.
I think she wanted to believe that she came from a more interesting background than she did, and she worked herself up into a state about it, and then wanted to make sure that the rest of the world came along with her.
She's an individual who set out to achieve her goals. Did she achieve the goals she set out to achieve? Well, maybe not, but she sure did achieve some fame and celebrity and an element of notoriety.
She was buried in Highgate Cemetery just outside of London, under the names Françoise Marie de Bourbon d'Orléans and Opal Whiteley. Today, Opal has made a literary comeback. Her diary was republished, and versions are still in print all over the world.
Her literary reputation is better than it ever has been. In Cottage Grove, the place that she disowned and they disowned her, nobody talked about her for 50 years. There's a giant mural of her right downtown, and you walk into the new library and you walk right past a life-size statue of her.
People saw something not just in the book that Opal had written, but also the story of her life. Not the controversy, not the outlandish claims. Opal's book talks about a desire for truth and a willingness to embrace the things that bring us joy. I would say that's timeless.
I hear songs, lullaby songs of the trees. I am happy listening to the twilight music of God's good world. I am real glad I'm alive.
To learn more about Opal Whiteley, visit our website at opb.org. Funding for Oregon Experience is provided by the James F. and Marion L. Miller Foundation, the Ann and Bill Swindells Charitable Trust, the Oregon Cultural Trust, and from viewers like you. Thank you.